Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us this week on Uncork PA. It's a show focused on Pennsylvania vineyards, wineries, and of course, wines. My name is Missy Wilson. I'm second generation winery owner at Cedar Ridge Vineyards, and I've been blessed to be part of the Pennsylvania wine industry for almost 20 years now. This is our last podcast of 2023, and we're using it to help you find those perfect wines for your upcoming holiday event. This is the time of year when one holiday backs into the next, into the next. It's a lot of fun time spent with family and friends, but it can be a little bit overwhelming. We'll have some great tips and suggestions for you starting with Thanksgiving and working your way all the way through New Year's. As always, whether you're hosting a party or a meal or you're joining someone, it's always nice to think a little bit outside the box and pick a bottle or two of wine that guests may not have tried before. And local is always great. Check out the Pennsylvania Winery Association's website at pennsylvaniawine.com. Find a few wineries close to you and visit their websites to get an idea of the wines that they make that might work well for your meal. Don't forget that the person behind the tasting bar can also help you with some great pairing ideas. The State Store also has some great made in PA options for you. There's a section towards the front end of the store that carries the selections of wines that are made throughout the state. Pick a bottle or two that seem interesting and share with your loved ones. There's no right or wrong answer when it comes to pairing wine with food, but we'll definitely offer you some tips. So to help us out with those tips, I'm happy to introduce you to our next guest, Denise Gardner. Denise is both a winemaking consultant in addition to being a wine educator. Thanks so much for joining us today, Denise.
Thank you for having me.
So Denise was on the program last year when she helped us pair our Easter and Passover wines. So can you remind us a little bit about what a winemaking consultant is and how it differs a little bit from being a winemaker? And why did you end up going in that direction?
Absolutely. So winemaking consultant primarily works with the winemakers, occasionally winemakers and winery owners, and we help them make real-time processing decisions in order to make the types of wine that they're looking to make. I currently work all over the United States with different winemakers in different states, and that's my primary function as a consultant, but I also do a lot of education in the background, both for winemakers and also for wine consumers in terms of learning about the winemaking process and also about wine appreciation. Why I went down this path? That's a good question. I think primarily because I really enjoyed working with a lot of different people, and I saw that there was a lack of winemaking expertise in different parts of the country. And so this was my way of reaching out to those people and being able to offer my expertise to the winemaking community.
So you have a great website at dgwinemaking.com. And it offers a lot of tips, not only for people in the industry, but also consumers, such as purchasing wines, enjoying wines, or even how to store wines after it's already open, which is a great place to head to get some more in-depth reading about different wine topics. So we'll get into the fun part, and then we'll go back into some of the things that you offer on your website. So coming up, we've got, fall and winter wines. You have all your upcoming holidays, and people are starting to get together with their family and friends in a variety of ways over the next couple months. So whether it's the person hosting a gathering themselves or they want to bring that hostess gift, what wine to have on hand tends to be a question that people get very overwhelmed with. So I'm going to offer up a few different scenarios, and we would love to see what kinds of wines you think would be great to bring for those occasions. So in just a couple days, we're looking at Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving is definitely a food lover's dream. You have your appetizers, your main course of turkey with all the sides. You have pies for dessert. And you can have the option of a variety of different wines, or you can just have one wine available throughout the entire meal. So if people want to go the less crazy route and just have one wine available for people to enjoy, what type of wine do you think would be great for that?
The easiest path of least resistance is always going to be sparkling because, like you said, for Thanksgiving, there's so many different types of food, from either a turkey, a meat product, It could be a vegetarian meal. And if you have anything like green bean casserole or just green beans being served, you also have a green natured vegetable in that course. That green natured vegetable starts to make things a little difficult for quote unquote pairings, only because the green flavors can be off putting when paired with certain types of wine. So if somebody only wants one wine for the entire meal, I almost always will recommend sparkling, because sparkling is going to be the most enjoyable, the most, it'll be elevating to most of the foods that are on the table. And it's a really easy wine that if you buy a dry sparkling, you can make it sweeter right at the table, either with a simple syrup, table sugar, or even sugar cubes, which is table sugar just in cube form. And that's a really easy way to appease a lot of different taste preferences when it comes to wine.
Perfect. So say you don't take the easy way out and you love to put on a big spread and a big meal and like to do things to the extreme. If you're going to go per courses, what are some options that you would suggest for maybe like, cheese to start and then your Thanksgiving meal and then dessert as well?
Sure. So in that case, I mean, you can always still start with sparkling. People love entering a room with a sparkling wine, but you can also mix and match different wines here. So Pennsylvania actually offers a lot of great options, because what we're looking for is a wine with some sort of notable acidity or sourness that's going to be able to pair with a lot of different wines. The thing with the acidity is that it elevates both the food and the wine when you're tasting it. If you go towards a West Coast wine where the acidity is lower, you'll start to notice that one flavor will like stick out between the wine and the food. Either the food's going to taste really good or the wine's going to taste really good, and they can sometimes compete with each other. But when we have wines of the East, we typically have that acidity factor that's going to pair very nicely. So what I would do here, I would start to look at what are the primary wine styles that are going to, again, appease a very large crowd. So something aromatic, white natured. This is going to be something like a Riesling, a Gewürztraminer. We also have Gruner Veltliner producers in the state, and even Vidal Blanc, which is a really nice white aromatic hybrid. All of those tend to be very crisp, and then they also have varying levels of sweetness. So you do have to watch that. Some are going to be dry, some are going to be sweet. So I always tend to follow the rule of pick for the diner, not for the dinner. So if you have a family that loves sweet, pick sweet. If you have a family that loves dry, pick dry. And again, anytime you have a dry wine, you can always add sugar in the house. It's not a big deal. Away from the whites in that case, then you're looking at reds. And here you want typically, I would say, like lower body or medium bodied reds, again, because that's more likely to pair with a plethora of things that are going to be presented at Thanksgiving. So this is going to include things like your hybrid reds, including Chambourcin, Noir are good options. You could also do something like Pinot Noir, but I also wouldn't steer away from things like Merlot or Cab Franc in this state, because of the way that their mouthfeel tends to be an association with the regional terroir.
Perfect. So the great part is pretty much you can pick up red, white, sweet, dry. Works great for Thanksgiving. A couple weeks after Thanksgiving, we then turn to Hanukkah, and people traditionally think of latkes and brisket. What types of wines would you suggest to have on hand if you to include in that Hanukkah meal?
So for Hanukkah, I mean, it depends on the religious nature of the family. You may want to find something kosher oriented, and we do have some of those selections in the state. Luckily, a lot of kosher wines are also Concord based, and again, there's a lot of Concord throughout the state. But Hanukkah is really about the oil. And so there's a lot of foods, like, yes, we typically might have brisket, but there's also typically a lot of oily based foods, which makes it really easy for wine pairing. You can do anything here. Any aromatic white, a dry white, rosé is even an option. And even, again, the lower bodied reds, or medium bodied reds. So anywhere from like Merlot, Cab Franc, even Cab Sauv, which again, it's an Eastern style, so it's hitting right between the really, really big Cabernets of the West and the really, really traditional cabs of the European countries. And so we're right in the middle, and it should be a nice pairing for a lot that's on the table as well.
Perfect. So after Hanukkah, Christmas rolls around. Traditional Christmases range from turkey to ham to beef. Everybody kind of has their own meal. Obviously, if Christmas includes turkey, great options are the ones that we had brought up for Thanksgiving. But what are your thoughts, especially ham is big, which is a little bit of a different type of beast when it comes to pairing food, and roast beef. What would be great options for those two?
So ham is salty, which is actually really easy to pair. Again, the salt's going to elevate the wine, and it will also help retain the flavor and taste of the food. So ham typically is going to go really well with rosés if you want to be adventurous and have a rosé in the middle of December or end of December. But you can also do a lot of whites here. So Chardonnays, I'd probably steer towards unoaked Chardonnays for this, only because that oaky flavor can be really intense. If you have a family that prefers the oaky Chardonnay, by all means, go for it. But I would tend to steer towards an unoaked wine in this case. And again, things like Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Gruner, all of these whites are going to be a really nice pairing for ham. You could also do more neutral varieties like Cayuga, which is fairly popular throughout the state of Pennsylvania. And that's also offered in a wine range of dry to sweet choices. You can do reds. I would say definitely stick towards a lower bodied, medium bodied red. In this case, I'd probably be leaning more towards the hybrid varieties, Chamberston, Chancellor, even Foch or Noire could be a good bet with ham. And the nice thing about if you did want to do reds, you can also use those as a base for like mulled wine if you wanted to make a hot spice wine. You can also use them for a variety of different cocktails as well. In terms of the roast beef selection, I'd probably, again, this is going to depend on like how you prepare the roast beef, but I'd probably steer more towards your reds. In that case, you're going to look at your Cabernets, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and even Merlot in that realm of wines. Another one too that I keep forgetting is Pinot Noir, and I know you're very familiar with Pinot Noir. That's going to be in the lower bodied or medium bodied red wine, so that's going to pair well with your ham or your Thanksgiving meal as well.
Perfect. So throughout all these holidays, sometimes brunch pops up. Sometimes it's part of your holiday tradition, whether it's Christmas brunch instead of Christmas dinner. Sometimes it's just you need that break and you want to spend some time with friends, so you get together for brunch. What are some great ideas for wines to include if you're going the brunch route instead?
Brunch route, if you didn't want to make wine cocktails, I'm almost always sticking to sparkling whites, aromatic whites, or very neutral whites, non-oaked whites, rosé, or lower-bodied reds, including things like Pinot Noir, because those, again, it's lower-bodied. That typically tends to be the kind of mouthfeel preference that people are going to prefer earlier in the day. And then again, they'll also pair well with a variety of things depending on what you might want for brunch. Here, the benefit is with sparkling, you can do cocktails. So there's a ton of different sparkling wine cocktails out there, from all different forms of mimosas to just, more intricate or sophisticated wine cocktails associated with sparkling today.
Perfect. So speaking of sparkling, New Year's Eve, hard to believe in just over a month we're going to be in a new year. So it's always great to celebrate with a bottle of sparkling wine. What are some Pennsylvania suggestions, wine suggestions that you might have of places that make sparkling, or even different varietals of sparkling? People tend to think of the same type of grape all the time when it comes to sparkling, but there are very many options.
Right. Traditional sparkling varieties from a French perspective are going to be, that we grow here in Pennsylvania, are going to be Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So those are your traditional Blanc de Blancs or Blanc de Noirs that you might see across the state. But I've also seen a lot of different varieties used for really nice sparklings, and this includes things like Riesling, Gruner Veltliner, Vidal Blanc, even sparkling Niagara. So if you're a big fan of that Niagara wine, then a sparkling Niagara might be the way to go for New Year's. Keep in mind, sparkling Niagaras are almost always sweet, but they can make really nice sparkling wines. And there's also sparkling cayugas. I've seen a fair amount of those on the western side of the state, and those are really, really nice. Again, in a range of sweetnesses from your dry sparkling all the way up to sweeter, for those that prefer the sweeter wine. So I think you have a lot of options there.
So, and then as we had mentioned before, you had talked about if there are for any reason leftovers, which probably would not be happening at my house. But if you have leftovers from New Year's Eve, the next day during brunch, you could always transform that leftover sparkling into a fun wine cocktail.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, winter is upon us. And as you can tell from the weather the past couple days, it's definitely starting to be bundle up time. Your days are getting shorter, the weather's getting colder. If we want to think positively, the great part about this change is that we get to transition into those heavier, fuller reds. So people really know about Cabernet Franc and Chambourcin, two heavier red grapes grown pretty much throughout the state. If people want to try something different or new besides just the Cabernet Franc and the Chambourcin, what are some other suggestions of wines that people should check out during the winter?
That's a tough one. I mean, we grow primarily most of the Bordeaux varieties in Pennsylvania. So that includes Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot. I think there's even a little bit of Petit Verdot in places. So those would be some of the varietals that you might want to check out as wines. However, I would also look at wineries that offer red blends, especially if they're listed as like a dry red blend, because they're often made in a style that's reminiscent of your Bordeaux blends. So it's going to be bigger bodied, more tannin, and just, more traditional in terms of what a dry red wine would taste like. I've mentioned Noiré a few times. I like Noiré, and it is grown across the state in very many different regions. The reason why I like it is because it has a flavor that emulates that of some of the oak toasting. It's a spicy black pepper flavor. So if you see a Noiré variety, or if Noiré is used in a blend, I think that could be a really nice winter wine as well, because it just has the flavor profile that, I don't know, it just naturally pairs well with those colder winter months. And you can find that in regions that may not have as prevalent growth of things like Cabernet Franc or Merlot or Cabernet Sauvignon. So I think that kind of tackles the two ends of the state.
Perfect. So that's a lot of great pairing information, which is perfect for the next 6 weeks before we get into 2024, which is kind of crazy. You also have a great newsletter that goes out on a monthly basis. So if people are interested in getting some more information from you, such as this, like what types of content do you tend to put out in your monthly newsletter, and how can they actually connect with you to get that in their inbox?
Sure. I have two different monthly newsletters. One is for winemakers. That's just called the Winemakers blog. You can find that on the winemakers site of dgwinemaking.com. The one that is more about wine pairing or everyday wine experiences, how to store wine, tips for buying wine, all that kind of stuff. That's it's called the DGW Sip and Swirl. That's on the Wine Lovers site of dgwinemaking.com. Very easy to figure out these two sites because you get to the homepage and you either go Wine Lovers or Winemakers. But you could also find links to these things on my Instagram page, which is at DG Winemaking. The Sip and Swirl is a lot of fun. I actually have one coming out soon about Gilded Age wines because the Gilded Age TV show was just released. So we try to stay on topic for the different parts of the year.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, so definitely looking for any of that fun information, great pairing information, head over to Denise's website, and then you can sign up. Does the monthly newsletter then get dropped into your inbox if you sign up?
Yes, it's free. It comes to your inbox, and you can read some of the archived issues right on the website.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your suggestions today, Denise, and definitely make sure you check out her Instagram page and her website for some other great tips and details about wine.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. So This time of year is actually a great time to visit Pennsylvania wineries as well. So, if it's time to relax after that crazy Christmas shopping with some friends, or if it's to go and grab a couple bottles of wines as gifts, here are a few key tips to help you out during this time frame. So, one of the key things is please take a note of the winery's hours. If you're going to just buy bottles of wine, if a winery closes at 5, it doesn't mean you show up at 5. Show up a couple minutes before if you're planning on just purchasing wine. If you're planning on doing a tasting, however, many wineries do stop serving tastings or wine by the glass, usually between 15 and 30 minutes before they close for the day. So if you have any questions about that, make sure you give the winery a call and they can clarify their wine tasting policies with you. If you do decide to go as part of a larger group, because it is a fun time and a fun way to spend time together during the holidays, if you have 6 or 8 or more people, definitely call the wineries in advance. Some wineries require you to schedule a tasting. Some wineries actually don't have room or space for groups that size. Also, if you're planning on using that minibus or a limo, or anything that's bigger transportation, you'll definitely want to call to see if they do accept those on site as well. Don't overschedule. So we've all done this where you have these great expectations and you plan on going to 5 wineries in a day. You'll want to make sure that you leave enough time at each winery. Wines are fun and enjoyable, and you want it to be relaxing, not stressful to get from point A to point B. Where you might think it might only take 25 or 30 minutes to go through a flight, I would plan on leaving at least 45 minutes to an hour, especially if you're part of a larger group. Many wineries also host a variety of events such as music, food trucks, and other things going on site. So, although you might be just going for a wine tasting, you might end up staying longer and relaxing because you're having so much fun. You'll definitely want to plan for food. If you're driving from one winery to another, you'll need that food on your itinerary. So whether it's bringing snacks or lunches to enjoy on site, and if you do that, you'll also want to check the winery's policies about outside food. Many wineries also carry cheese or snacks or items that you can eat on site. Some have restaurants and others have food trucks on site. So if you don't have that as an option, also schedule a stop at that fast food restaurant from winery A to winery B. Or if you want to have that fun, relaxing time with friends, sit down at a restaurant too. The other thing is you do want to try something new. As we talked with Denise before, there might be some wines out there that you're not quite as familiar with. Wine tasting and flights are the best way to try those wines. You can ask the server behind the bar what the winery's most popular wines might be, or maybe even what their current favorites are. They should also be able to suggest some wines based on what you're currently drinking. Flights and tastings are not a huge commitment. They're usually 1 or 2 ounces of a wine that you'll get to decide whether you like it or not. And it's not a huge commitment, as is buying a whole bottle of wine and then determining that that's not your favorite. If you ever have any questions, either in advance or during your trip, the tasting room staff is a great resource to utilize. You can give the tasting room a call and they'll be able to answer any questions that may come up as you're planning a trip. And while you're in the tasting room, if you have questions about what a wine might pair well with, or the fact that you really are enjoying a Pinot Grigio right now, what do they have similar? And they can give you really great suggestions for wines that you might really enjoy. So over the past 2 seasons, I've enjoyed introducing to the variety that is Pennsylvania wines. We've talked about a variety of topics, what happens in the vineyard, great road trip options, learning about those sparkling wines, the meads, the ciders, rosés, and so much more. And I want to thank you for joining me on this wonderful journey. Just like the wines and the vineyards hibernate throughout the winter, Uncork PA will be doing the same thing, but feel free to head back through the archives and revisit those regions, the wines, and the people that make up the amazing industry that is wine in Pennsylvania. If you want to look for additional information about the varietals, the wines, your wine pairings, and so much more, PennsylvaniaWine.com is the best resource out there. You can plan your next wine tasting trip, you can read about the wines that are up and coming, and you can enjoy educational videos and articles on their website. And as always, we want to thank the Pennsylvania Winery Association for supporting this program with grant money from the PLCB, and we look forward to sharing more hidden gems of the Pennsylvania wine world with you.